Good evening and welcome to another episode of Equilibrium Live. We're on episode 7. I almost can't believe that we've come this far. And if you've been with us all this... Sorry, there's a technical hitch. There we go. Now, this week we have I'm literally starstruck because I've been saying to these guys behind stage that I'm super duper honored to have them on the platform. This week we're going to be talking about artist management. If you've been following this series for the last 8.5 weeks, this platform is all about enabling and empowering Christian and gospel artists, creatives, to balance music business and music ministry, and to kind of plug the gap that we've probably noticed exists in the knowledge within the scene and within the industry, if you could call it that. This week, I have on the panel LORETTA Andrews, who is an artist manager. And if you know any of the artists she manages, you probably remember somebody like Governor B. You probably know Jake Isaac, and I'm going to let her give a full introduction of herself and of the stuff that she does with her artists as well as an artist manager. We have Marcus Edwin. I've known him for a while, and I know some of the exciting artists he manages, including Chris the Ambassador, and I think he's also got a new group. I'm going to let him talk about that a bit in more detail. Also, we have CHIBUZOR OKORO, who, again, if some of you know the artist he manages, I'm not even going to say too many names. I'm just going to say Cold Out Music. But I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a bit more detail. And I'm going to ask them, as usual, the icebreaker to give us a bit more insight into their personalities and to know a bit more about who they are. But before we go into all of that, if you're watching on Facebook and YouTube, thanks for joining. Please share the link to this session to your friends, your family, anyone who's a creative who could benefit from this conversation. Today, we're talking about artist management. All you need to know about artist management. Grab a pen, grab a paper, grab your tea, coffee, juices, and let's get knowledgeable together. So I'm going to start with you, LORETTA. You're going to introduce yourself a bit more, but also growing up, we had fairy tales, we had, kids' stories that we heard and that we probably loved. So as you introduce yourself, I'd love for you to tell us what your favorite kids' story or fairy tale is or was and why. So over to you, LORETTA.
Okay, put me on the spot there. Okay, well, to tell you first a bit about myself. So LORETTA Andrews, my company is called Safe Music Management, and I manage, as Sarah already mentioned, Governor B and Jake Isaac. I also manage Joshua Luke Smith, Bianca Rose and Madison Ryan Ward. And also with a kind of management hat on as well, along with Bianca Rose, we started a project called I Am Independent, which supports independent music artists. And we mainly do that through a podcast. We've got some video resources, a boot camp that we run as well, and through our Instagram. And I do a bit of management consultancy for independent artists as well. So that's kind of what I do. There's the harder question, which is the fairy tale one. I absolutely loved, I don't know if it counts as fairy tale, but I absolutely loved the Narnia books.
Oh, yeah.
I loved the idea of going through a wardrobe and into another world with talking animals. So
yes.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, and I just wanted to meet Aslan. I would get goosebumps every time they mentioned Aslan's on the move. So yeah, I think that's the first one that comes to mind.
That's beautiful. You do know it's predicated on Christianity. I don't know if you know.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
At the time, because I didn't grow up in a Christian family. So at the time I was reading them and I reread them again as a Christian, and it brought on a whole new light.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Excellent. Thanks, LORETTA. Marcus?
Okay, so obviously my name is Marcus, and I'm currently run Uprise Music and manage 4 artists, just in the process of signing another one as well. Been doing probably management from about 15 years ago, more in the background kind of thing, but come more to the forefront this year with it. And most probably people know me more. True Life Promotions was my first venture, so that's the most popular one that people tend to know me for. But literally I just started in management because I wanted to work with the artists from the ground roots, rather than wait till they got to that stage where they're ready for promotion and management, promotion and all that kind of stuff. Really kind of working with them from the beginning, helping to develop the journey, and really kind of like nurturing them on their artist journey along the way. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Yeah, I think it is the hardest question now. But you know, if Loretta's going to say Narnia, I'm going to jump on that too, because I never was really one for fairy tales as such. But
Don't be stealing other people's answers now,
no,
Marcus.
the reason I say that, honestly, I had literally all the Chronicles of Narnia books. I've got the DVDs behind me. So it's one of those things where I've always been big on that one. I never really got into fairy tales. It's more that and maybe like anime. So
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'll let it slide. I'll leave you for now. CHIBUZOR, I'm not going to harass you.
I'll introduce myself. So I'm CHIBUZOR OKORO. For those who don't know me, I'm the founder of HFP Music. I manage quite a few artists at the moment, about 6 artists in total. And in addition, with HFP Music, we're starting to do other things like distribution. So we help some other artists with their distribution and also help them with a lot of the administrative stuff that a lot of artists struggle with as well. I've been doing this for about 5 years now. So I wouldn't say I'm too old in this game, but I've learned a few things along the way. And it's absolutely an absolute joy, to do it. In terms of fairy tales, I don't know, I'm not big on fairy tales, but one thing I do remember as a child is I used to love the Famous Five. I don't know if anybody ever read Famous Five books.
Yeah.
Famous Five books, Secret Seven. I was on it, and then also every single Tintin book I read.
Oh wow! Yeah.
Every single one. Yeah. That took over my childhood. I can tell you that.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well, if I had to answer that question, I'd say the Three Little Pigs. I quite admired, obviously, the one that was really smart and built his house with bricks, which is what I like to do with my life. So I think right from when I was a kid, I liked all the pragmatic characters in kids' stories. But no, thanks a lot for the introduction and obviously for giving us some insights into your personalities. I think these answers actually kind of tell us why you guys are successful and why you are who you are today. So one of the first questions I tend to get when people, because I sometimes get people call me and ask me questions about music business, and when it comes to management, the question usually is, who is an artist manager? I've had many different definitions and sometimes misconceptions of who an artist manager is. And it would be nice to at least start tonight with just getting that clear definition. It may not necessarily be black and white, but at least getting from your perspectives what you understand a music or an artist manager to be. I don't know who wants to go first.
I don't mind jumping in first.
Yep.
I'll say 2 things on that. I kind of feel that if you go towards like when I first started in the music industry in general, so you're talking like the 90s, I kind of felt that the role of an artist manager was probably more defined then than it is now. The reason I say that is because for most artist managers I know now, whether they be gospel, secular, whatever it might be, they tend to be wearing more than one hat, as opposed to previously where you'll definitely have a separate booking agent, you'll definitely have a tour manager and all that kind of stuff. I tend to find a lot of artist managers now kind of wearing a bit of each kind of thing. So I would say the artist manager, if I was to kind of describe one, would be to say the person that you kind of have that music business and also kind of friendship relationship with, that can help you develop your journey and get it to where it needs to get to. That's the best way I could probably put it, solely, like I said, because I don't think it's as defined as it was before.
Right. Okay. Anyone agree or disagree with that or add to that?
I definitely think the role of the manager has changed. I think Marcus is absolutely right. It's really evolved, and the thing that a manager needs to know these days is a bit of every element. Before, I think you could just know the business side, but now it's essential that you know a little bit of every element. And particularly if you're working with independent artists, you will be doing all those roles until a booking agent comes on or a tour manager comes on. But how I usually answer that question is in terms of what is a manager. It's somebody who manages your career. So you need to have something to manage to start with. So usually I think, and this might slightly go into another question as to when you need a manager, but usually I think people think they need a manager sooner than they do, because you have to be able to have something that you can pass over, and that the role of the manager is to steer and guide your career. So to create opportunities, but also to facilitate your plans. I think that's kind of how I'd say it in a nutshell.
That is really, really good.
Yeah, I think I'll jump in and add to what Marcus and Loretta have said. I think when I first started this, I always used to wonder, why do we use the word manager? Because if you're somebody who's worked in offices and like in formal spaces, you would know that a manager is kind of like your line manager who manages a team of people. But then you have in the music industry, a manager is a person who manages talent, manages a person. And to a large extent, it's almost like, you need to be ready to deal with everything that your talent throws at you, or everything that your talent requires, at whatever stage that they're in. Except, the only thing I've never had to do is go on stage and sing for them. That's not happened yet.
I've done backing vocals.
Wow. So there you go. That proves my point that literally you need to be ready to do everything. So a manager is a person who literally supports the talent in any way, shape, or form that they need support for. So you really need to be ready. I always say, look, managers are like Swiss Army knives. They need to be ready to do any and everything in the best way possible. So there's a lot of like sharp thinking and quick thinking on your feet that needs to happen as a manager. That would be my summary.
That's really good. And there's kind of a recurring theme in all the answers, which is that the artist needs to have something for the manager to manage, whether it's a career, And I remember when I first started out, one of the questions I asked one of my mentors was, who's going to manage me? And obviously I had no following, I had no song, I had nothing, right? And sometimes the responses you get, which may sound like criticism or like a hard knocks, are actually the truth that you need to hear. Because she said to me, well, here's the thing, no one's going to manage you because you don't have a following, and she's like, I was like, really? I thought they would help me build a following, and this is me being very green. And I know that there are probably people, and this is why I wanted to have this discussion, who are probably thinking what I was thinking, 7 odd years ago. And she's like, you don't have a following. You need to build a following. A manager is going to be interested in seeing that there's something there to be managed, which kind of brings me to the next question, which is, okay, so we want a manager to manage a career or at least something tangible. At what point should an artist be thinking, okay, I can start looking for a manager? Or is it even a thing that artists should really aspire to? I mean, how does an artist actually know, okay, I need to look for a manager, I can't cope by myself, or I'm just going to carry on? What has been your experience with establishing that line in the sand where it then becomes an issue? Because as you say, there has to be a career. So at what point does the career get handed over from the artist to the manager? Is probably where I'm going with this question.
Maybe I can go first on that one. I think with my artists, I've had very, very varying experiences with all of them. There have been some of them that I've really literally managed from day one. But like you said, there was something that they brought to me, and that was a song, and that was a start. So like, exactly. Look, I have this song I've written, I need to record it. I don't know what to do, and that's the key thing, is that when as a talent or as an artist, you get to a point where you realize that a lot of the stuff you're trying to do is probably out of your depth, it's out of what you're able to do by yourself, then maybe you need to start thinking about, getting a manager. And there'll be lots of artists who are absolutely able to do everything by themselves. They don't need a manager. There are people like that, and they're quite successful at that. But some other people would need a manager because, they're not able to manage creating the music and giving enough focus to that, as well as doing everything else that they need to do.
Anyone else wants to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I'd probably just second what he said. With all the artists that I've worked with over the years, I kind of feel like each one, the story is different as to why they've come, and why the journey has begun, where they think to themselves, I need an artist manager now. I think for me, just like you said, there has to be something initially there anyway. But I like to have, for me, for example, I like to have that initial meeting with them, even after they approach me, to kind of dig a bit into what they've said to me as to why they feel they need an artist manager, like throw out some questions to them and really kind of get them to think about the questions that they may have not really answered. Because a lot of people just say, you know what, I need an artist manager. So then now you're asking, you know, but why do you need an artist manager? And then they might turn around and say, for example, well, I need to get more bookings. And actually what you need is a booking agent. Do you know what I'm saying?
I was going to come to that. Yeah.
So I won't go into your thing too much there with it. But
no, carry on.
Every artist, I think the reason that they come and the reason they start wanting to have that artist manager is very different. And I think it plays two parts, where you need to kind of like make sure that they've got something to start off with, and also you need to kind of like throw back at them and say, you know what, let's dive into this so I can actually hear from you and we can actually see, do you really need to have one?
Do you want to add to that, Loretta?
I don't think so. I think it's all been said. I think only the other thing is, yes, it's not necessarily even about managing a career, but it's about managing something. So it's making sure that you're bringing something. And often people also ask, again, relating it, and I don't know, maybe perhaps you're going to ask this soon, is how you find a manager. But again, having something to offer is how you find a manager, because if you've created a bit of a buzz around yourself, you know, don't worry, there will definitely be managers approaching you. That's one way to find them, is by taking yourself as far as you can before you can no further. And also a good manager will create opportunities for you, so they will have their own networks and perhaps networks and contacts that you don't have. So again, it's when you just get to the point when you've taken yourself as far as you can go, when you're not managing anymore, that's when perhaps a good idea is to get one.
I love what you said there. Take yourself as far as you can until you can go no further. And I think that's probably a good kind of benchmark, because there's no black and white. It can't be, oh, you've hit X number of streams or you've done so many gigs or whatever, but it's literally do as much as you can by yourself as an independent artist. And then when you get to the point where you feel there's more that you can do, but you can't do it by yourself, then I guess that's when to ask for help. And that actually kind of segues into the next question, which was really, what are the specifics around, in today's generation or in today's age, 21st century, artist manager, different from what we had 10 odd years ago? What should an artist be looking for without being unrealistic in their expectations in an artist manager?
I'll start this time. I think you have to, I think that the answer to that question will probably be different per artist.
Absolutely.
And per manager. Is a very unique relationship, the artist and manager relationship, and how that works for one couple, if you like, or group, may be completely different to another. Some people, particularly if they're at the start of their career, like Chibuzo said, then they may want developing, so they may want a really hands-on manager who is going to literally help them to decide their image, be involved with planning videos, and or even, you know, in a almost executive producer role. Whereas an artist perhaps who's been going quite a way by themselves may want somebody who's not going to particularly steer them creatively, although there'd be a sounding board, but they want them to handle their business and to create business opportunity, perhaps find a publishing deal and those kind of things for them. So first you've got to know what it is you want. What kind of manager? Do you want a manager who's going to help to shape you because you don't feel you've particularly found your sound? Or are you somebody who's, I know who I am, I want someone to amplify the work I've already done? But I think the absolute non-negotiable basics are the most important element of the artist manager relationship is trust. So somebody who you can really build a friendship with. I remember, funny, I was only talking about this 2 days ago with one of my artists, that somebody else, when I started managing it, said to me, let me give you some advice, never manage a friend. And I remember thinking, oh, okay, but I'm actually really good friends with all of my artists. I genuinely call them all my friends. And for me, my style of management is I have to be friends with. I mean, I'm actually godmother to one of my artist's children.
Oh, wow.
So I'm very close. It's more like a family, but that wouldn't work for everyone. Other people like to keep that distance and keep it very business-like and keep it separate in that way. So it's about starting that relationship and seeing what works. And sometimes those boundaries will get a bit blurred and you may have to define those, but being sure what you want and what kind of manager you want, what kind of relationship, but that it's built on trust and openness both ways.
I'm going to let Marcus and CHIBUZOR weigh in on that response, but I want to expand on that answer you just given, because it's raised another question which artists tend to have when they see that, if you like, family of artists and manager, and that relationship and that dynamic and chemistry ongoing, and they might feel like, goodness me, I couldn't fit in, you know, I couldn't become part of this group. Do you ever get that? I'm coming to CHIBUZOR and Marcus on the question of what should an artist manager do, but just off the back of what you've said about that family dynamic, do you feel like that sometimes puts people off from becoming a part of sort of that collective, or do you actually find it also prevents you from taking people on because you feel like they won't fit the chemistry that you have going on with your existing artists?
Well, I'll tell you, well, it's not a secret, but I'll tell you something, in that every artist I've got, I only ever wanted to manage one. And,
right.
And every time I've managed someone, I'm like, I'm not taking on anyone else. And not particularly for any of those reasons, but just because I'm just party of one
person. Exactly.
And then each time it's, you know, and obviously we're talking about Christian and gospel scene here, we're all Christians here, but each time it's been a God thing in that you're meant to work with this person, and somehow there's room, and it's been so right. And then I'm like, right, I'm at capacity now, I've got two, and then there's been somebody else. But what was really really unique, and I understand it's not the same for everyone, and particularly perhaps if they're not Christians, but with my most recent artist, because we had such a dynamic with the rest of us, we did have a little meeting and we're like, how do we feel about this? And at the end of the day, they're not in a group together. They've all got their individual careers. So in some sense that they're individual, but I did ask them how they felt about me taking on a fifth artist in terms of workload, in terms of the vision. But each person that has come to me has really fit in the ethos that I have for my company, Safe Music, and my mission statement. So each time I felt challenged, like, okay, I think God's telling me to look into this. I mean, I'm sure, like the other two, every day, there's not a day that passes that I don't get an email from somebody asking me to manage them, you know, people I don't know. So I take it very seriously who I do. And I really am at capacity, by the way, if anyone's about
sure
to
you are. Goodness me.
But yeah,
I was going to talk about capacity as well, but yeah, I can just imagine that. Yeah.
But I do think how are they going to fit into the dynamic, but not in because there's no room, more in that I have a particular mission statement of how I work. But that has attracted people who exactly have the same vision. And I think that's quite common that it works that way. Right.
Cool. That's really good to know. Marcus, on what an artist manager should do?
I absolutely love everything Loretta said. I think for me, you know, just here sitting and thinking about the question you asked, and trying to think, how have I actually picked up all these artists that I picked up? And I've realized that there's a bit of a web, you know, I can literally join dots between all of them. You know, there's some kind of relationship. They went to uni together, went to the same church, you know, and somehow I think we've formed this big, you know, family. I do have two artists that are not based in the UK. That one's another topic, you know. So Marizu's based in Nigeria and Daphne is in Canada. And the way we met is slightly different from the other ones who are based in the UK. But fundamentally for me, you know, for me to actually manage anyone, I really, really have to feel like it can work, you know, that there is some kind of chemistry and connection, you know, between, not just between them as a person, but between the spirit of what they're doing. You know, first of all, you know, I really, really, really have to feel their music. You know, that's because
can you say that one more time for those listening?
You know, I can't give you constructive criticism if I don't like your music, you know, or I don't get it, you know. It's not to say that the music is bad, but it's just not my cup of tea, you know. So there's certain things I check for before I decide to manage an artist. And then, I mean, Loretta, I get emails just like you know, people asking, you know, sir, please manage me, you know, I've got great talents, this and that, you know. And I'm like, you know, sometimes I go and listen to their music and I just don't get it. You know, I don't understand, you know, where they're heading. I don't see how I can contribute. You know, I've also got people who are secular artists, you know, Christian artists who have reached out to me and saying, look, can you manage me? And I'm like, look, your music is great, but honestly, I don't really think I'm the right person because I don't understand that industry. You know, the industry I understand is the Christian music industry. So there's so many things you need to consider when you're looking for a manager. It's not just somebody who labels themselves with the title of manager. It needs to be somebody who connects with the music you do, the spirit behind what you do, and there has to be some form of, you know, chemistry that shows two of you can work together. Because, you know, for me, I always tell my artists, look, this is close to being in a marriage. You know, literally.
It is, yeah. I've said that before.
Exactly.
Wow.
We're going to argue. We're going to fight. We're going to make up. We're going to disagree on many things. I'm going to tell you things that you don't like to hear. And you're going to tell me things that I don't like to hear either, you know, but we have to work out how to make this relationship work, you know, and until you see it that way, it's just going to be a clash of egos and ideas. Yeah.
Well, that's good. Marcus? More so on what a manager does, because I know Chibuzor's kind of responded more so on the dynamic within the team, but that's fine because we need to hear more of that, to be honest. But yeah.
You know what? It's both of these guys have covered quite a bit already in terms of answering that question, and I would definitely just echo a lot of what they have said. Loretta, especially, you know, it is so important that to have that. Well, for me, anyway, as a manager, I like having that closeness with the artists, and you know, that kind of level of friendship with them. I think it allows me to manage the artists even better. And I think the artists, what they come to look for, again, is very different for each and every one. I mean, with Chris, the ambassador that I manage, you know, that kind of wasn't even planned. He just like was the artist I called on to do an event that I put on, and before we know it, we all, you know, I was managing him. But we have that kind of relationship where I can say anything to him, good or bad, and he knows where I'm coming from with it because of the kind of relationship that we have. He knows that I'm not trying to just be bad mind or anything like that, and I know that I don't have to sit down and fear saying certain things to him, you know, because he's going to take it a certain way. He understands our relationship. We have that closeness where I can say things to him, and you know, he'll be able to say, you know what, I'll give you an example. He did a recording of a video recently for promotion he was meant to do, and it took him 2 hours to do it. And then when he came to me, I told him it wasn't good enough, but I was able to say that to him, and he understood where I was coming from, and he knows the reason why I've said it to him. So I think that's very important to have that kind of relationship with the artist. And I think as an artist, when you're looking for a manager, you really need to kind of look for someone that, again, like Chibuzor says, that one, they like your music, because if they like your music, they're going to get behind it 100%. And two, I think if you see that you can have that relationship with them, then you know that they're going to be able to speak to you honestly at all times. So I think those would probably be the two things I would say initially to look for. Someone that, you know, when you present yourself to them, they can catch the vision of what you're doing with your music. And two, one that you feel comfortable enough to be able to say what you need to say to them.
So in terms of what a manager does for an artist, just for the sake of those who are not really clear, and I know it's become a bit of a gray area, artist managers wearing so many hats. You just given an example of, you know, your artist came, gave you a video, you said it wasn't that great. So would we say things like helping with branding is part of what a manager does, whether it's for an established or for a new artist? Even for the established artist, if they had their whole idea, they probably would still engage you and run it by you. So would that be something that you'd agree on? Say branding, being part of a marketing strategy, marketing plan, being part of potentially the creative process, having some inputs in the writing and the production, even if not necessarily sponsoring it, having a say in things like events and booking. So those are the kind of very practical activities that I'm looking to confirm or to get some insight from yourself as to do managers actually, for the sake of those who probably aren't really clear on those specific kinds of activity.
Definitely. I mean, like we said earlier, ideally, if you can have somebody that fits the various roles, and then, you know, you're good. But for the managers nowadays, you do have to learn a bit of everything. So yes, you will be helping with the branding, you will be helping with the booking, you will be helping with the, the marketing and all that kind of stuff. I think it's important for a manager to be able to know all those things anyway, especially if you're just like Loretta said, a one person trying to help the artists out. You have to know that stuff. With my artists, I definitely get hands-on involved with all the decision making, from the look of their CD cover to the way, the kind of videos and stuff they put out on social media, to the music they put out. You know what I'm saying? The kind of producers that they work with. And I think it's because I've developed that relationship with them, and also because like they value the experience that I've had, to know, okay, I want you to kind of stir me in the right direction with everything, even down to contracts. Do you know what I'm saying? A lot of my artists will come to me and say to me, actually, can you draw up the contract? And I'll draw it up. We'll sit down, we'll go through it, have legal go through it as well, and before we even present it to the producer or whoever else. So there, all those little parts that you mentioned, I think the artist manager nowadays, like unless you have a bigger team, will be involved in those things. And I think it's crucial in terms of the artist journey and getting them to where they need to get to, that you have that knowledge.
Excellent. And for those who've just joined, you're on Equilibrium Live. You've joined us on episode 7, and we're talking artist management, all things that you need to know on this topic. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat box on Facebook or on YouTube, and I'm positive that my guests have all the answers that you need tonight. So talking about, the things that an artist, I nearly said line manager, an artist manager does. This is a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of sweat that goes into all the activities that you do. How do you manage prioritizing different artists, given that you potentially manage between 4 to 7 or 8? And how do you ensure that you're not overstretched, you're not going past capacity, but at the same time everyone's getting what they need to get within the family?
It's a very good question. I think 10 kids, me, right? Yeah, it is. It depends where they are in their release cycles. And amazingly, so I've been doing this this is my 6th year, I think. And until this year, somehow I never had 2 at the same time. It was very amazing. Good. It just worked out that way. And it wasn't my careful planning. It just worked out that way until this year. And in May of this year, all 5 of my artists were releasing something. And that month was crazy, and the month leading up to that as well. So I think in terms of prioritizing, usually it's who is, whereabouts you are, because somebody could be at the creating stage, whereas you're more involved as a manager when you're coming up to the releasing and getting all of those moving parts in place. But I tried all different strategies, and I'd love to actually learn from the guys, because for me, I'm constantly, how can I be more efficient? Because it is pretty crazy. And I've got 5 now. So for, I think, well, actually, I was going to say 2 weeks. I think it lasted a week. I thought, okay, I'm going to do each day for one artist. Genius. Okay. So Monday I'll do Governor B. Tuesday. It honestly, barely lasted a week, because of course we'll start to work for that artist, and then an email will come in or a phone call or something that
you need to respond to instantly. Yeah.
And it just doesn't work that way. So it's the interesting thing about being a manager is there's no kind of set routine. Every day is different, which I love about the job. But at the same time, it's more like putting out fires and what's most urgent, or who's screaming at you the loudest. But I obviously, when you've done a plan, usually with each of your artists, you'll have a plan for the whole year or the cycle. So at least I have those plans, so I can be a bit organized that way. But of course, there will also be some crossover. But prioritizing is just literally whatever it is most important at that moment.
I guess it's my turn next, right? I have to say something.
Yes,
I was gonna say, when you guys, Loretta and Marcus, figure it out, you should come and tell me.
Oh wow!
Goodness gracious
me!
I was hoping you would tell me.
It's an interesting question, actually, because the thing about it is that you need to keep on making sure that all your artists feel like they've got your 100% attention. You know, that is the challenge, is when my artist, you know, sends me a message at, you know, 11 p.m., you know, and I've got these 10 other things to do for the other artists. How do I make sure that that artists feel like they've got my 100% attention?
And do you delegate, or are you literally solely responsible for managing each one, or do you have like a team, for example, so you can delegate to an assistant?
I was going to come to that. So I think late last year, I've started to get a few people on board to help me out with certain things. You know, I realized it got to a point where managing bookings was just impossible, you know.
Absolutely.
So I had to get somebody to help me out with that. And I have somebody who helps me with things like business development, you know, so everything related to, you know, promotion and all that stuff. You know, I've got somebody who helps me with that. On the creative side, I've got somebody as well who I can, you know, throw things at, and she just takes care of it, you know. So it's gotten to a point where it's absolutely impossible for me to do every single thing. But you know, what's key is that my artists feel like they can reach me at any point, you know, and I'm the single point of contact. And then I can farm out all the different tasks to different people to help me, you know, be a bit more efficient. But I will say that, just like Loretta said, having a plan is quite important, where at the beginning of the year, you kind of chart out the year and say that this is our release plan for the year, so that you don't get to a point where everybody's releasing on the same day, you know, because, you know, that could very easily happen. But I will say I share the same sentiments with Loretta. This summer has just been so busy. You know, we've got back-to-back releases, but you know, it's gotten to a point where we're now having to think about next year. How do we make sure we space things out better? You know, and also one thing I will mention is that I try my best to make sure that everybody is aware of what everybody else is doing.
That's really good.
So
but do you find some artists don't want anyone to know what they're doing? Do you find
absolutely. So obviously, it's very important that your artist feels like what they discuss with you is held as confidential, you know. So I would have conversations with each artist, and nobody else will have to know anything we've discussed. But at the beginning of the year, we try to lay out clearly what everybody wants to try and achieve, you know, and it could be general terms, you know. I want to release 2 EPs this year. I want to release an album, XYZ. So everybody has a sense of the workload, you know, and it makes it easier for them to have mercy on me throughout the year, you know, and it works every time. So I would say communication, making sure everybody's together, feels like they're part of the family. They understand, you know, what the goals of the team, the label mates are, you know, that kind of thing. And I think it just helps to keep the whole machine oiled well, and it causes less friction, basically.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with what these guys are saying. I mean, managing one artist is tough work as it is, but when you see you start taking on more, it does get a lot harder. I think it goes back to what we were saying before about the whole family thing. When I got all my artists together and had the ones I wanted underneath the uprise, one of the first things that I wanted to do, and I did do that, was get everybody to jump in a Zoom, get to know each other, and kind of build that relationship amongst the thing. Because when we say family, I didn't want it to be just a thing of the title, yeah, we're a family because we're under uprise, but actually we're a family in the sense of, you know, so like, for example, Kalisha releases something, you know, Gospel X, Chris the Ambassador, and everybody else is talking about it and sharing it and doing all that kind of stuff, you know, saying, really getting behind each other. And I think that's vitally important in terms of firstly managing all the artists, that they can actually support each other. The second thing as well, I think technology these days makes it a lot easier. So you're not always able to jump on the phone, but then you've got WhatsApp and stuff like that, so you could drop a message and say, guys, you know, just checking in, how you doing, anything going on that I need to be aware of, that kind of stuff. But what I do try to do with my artists as well is have a meeting with them at least once a week. Doesn't always work out like that, but in my head, I set that out as a goal that I want to have with them. It does get a bit tougher. So like with Gospel X, for example, these girls are at uni and doing their stuff as well. So it's trying to work, you know, between the whole uni kind of the schedule and then being the artist. But in my head, I'm saying, you know, if I can try and meet with you guys at least once a week, catch up, plan, okay, what's the next stage of what we're doing? Even if they're not got a release out, okay, what we're doing in terms of your engagement on social and how can we best plan for that? You know, that kind of thing. So I really kind of just try to stay connected as best as I can throughout the week. And then like Loretta was saying, everything else is kind of based on where they're at in terms of their releases and stuff like that. Summertime, like they said, it's just crazy because every artist wants to release a summer jam. So you're just kind of like in that position where you're thinking, okay, let's do you first. Once where we need to one of you, then we move on to you. But it still gets tough because, like you said, you've got so many artists and everyone needs your attention. So it's trying to find that balance where they don't feel like you've just kind of left them to the side. Because you do, well, I don't know about these two, but I do have moments where I feel guilty, where I feel like, have I spent enough time or spoken to this one enough, or you know, that kind of thing. So it's that juggling. But I think the main thing for me is literally just the communication, and for Uprise anyway, just really actually keeping that whole family thing going.
That's really good. I have a question actually. Yes. Do managers invest financially in artists?
Sometimes in the beginning, I have done with my artists before, and of course the I'm sure we'll get on to the money question. But you know, for a long time you're not earning anything. You get a percentage of what your artists earn, and in the beginning nobody's earning anything, and then, you know, it feels, you know, if they get their first gig and it's 50 quid, you feel really bad taking your 20%, so you just don't for a long time. And I actually think that's good, because then there's nobody can say that you're not, you don't believe in your artist and that your artist doesn't believe in you. You're both just working really hard because you believe in this project so much that it is going to bear fruit at some point. So in the beginning, you know, artists are, you know, it's hard to be an artist, and resources is usually the biggest thing that's a challenge for independent artists who are doing it by themselves. And there's blessings with that, because it forces you to be very creative when you've got a low budget, and some of the most amazing ideas come simply because you don't have, you know, the funds. But at the same time, I have definitely invested in some of my artists in the early days, absolutely, and I felt okay with that.
But that shouldn't necessarily be an expectation of a manager. I think that's probably the question.
No, and there's been times when I
you don't want to force that.
It's not a given, and there's been times when I've wanted to be able to support in a way financially that I haven't been able to, and that's when we've had to look for funding or other things in the early days. But if I was in a position that I could, I would. But it definitely hasn't been an expectation on their part, and it definitely shouldn't be an expectation for artists, unless it's a development deal where perhaps it's a label situation as well. Then it isn't usual.
Do you guys want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think I look at it differently. I really not differently per se, but I see a manager as somebody who must invest in the artist. You're going to do so many things free of charge. Literally, I don't even understand how that it's possible not to do that. You know, it's like from day one for a lot of the artists I work with. You know, I mean, I started with them from scratch, right? So you talk about months on end where we've not earned anything really. You know, we're spending, and nothing's coming back. You know, where are you going to get the 20% from? You know,
20% of zero is zero, isn't it?
Exactly, 20% of zero is zero. So it's easy to have a 20% contract written down and signed, and we're all happy. But you know, we need to make some money, and this is where you know, Loretta was talking about the early days. The early days are the hardest, you know, days. You know, when you're really grinding and you need to really sort of believe in the artist so much to want to keep on going. And you need to be committed, for the long run, for it to work. So I think managers are constantly investing. It might not be monetary, but it just comes with the job. It comes with the territory. You need to invest your time. You need to invest your emotions, invest your advice, invest everything, invest your prayers. And artists need a lot of that at the beginning. They need the money's good, but they also need a lot more. And I think a manager can help provide a lot of that. But then also you have different deals. I mean, I've had deals with my artists where I have chosen to fund, their music. So you could have a manager who's also funding. It depends on what type of deal you have. I mean, in music, there's so many different types of deals. There are no rules. You literally just do what works and what works for you and your artist. So yes, a manager can invest monetary funds into a manager can invest into the artist, but a manager should have the mindset that they're always going to invest. It may not be monetary, but they need to just keep pouring into the artist, and hopefully it pays off in the long run.
Yeah, in the long run. Marcus, want to weigh in? We're getting some questions on the chat, but I don't know if you want to weigh in.
I would, just very quickly. I mean, I'm definitely in agreement with these guys. Like Loretta said as well, I've definitely had to invest monetary, and as well as Chibuzo said, there's other ways as well. I mean, I've been very fortunate where I came from a background where I was able to learn graphic design and all that kind of stuff. So I've been able to design the artist CD covers and advertising campaigns, all that kind of stuff. I've been able to do that. But there are times, for example, where I've got artists and I know you need a photo shoot, but you can't afford one. So I'll do what I need to do to kind of weigh in on that. I think you just kind of need to get to that place where you realize that, and it's also important for artists to also realize, which I suppose goes back to what we were saying earlier about the selection process, that actually this isn't something that's going to happen overnight. You need to understand that this is a journey we're on. There are some people that get lucky and they just blow up instantly. I've seen it, but majority of artists, this is a long time journey, and the plan that we're doing is very long. Is a long journey that we got to set for. Absolutely. So that means that don't think because you released a single, it's the absolute banger, then suddenly you're going to be flying off to America doing tours and all this kind of stuff. It doesn't work like that. It really doesn't. You could release the best track from your perspective ever, and then you still not get the love. So you really need to understand that that you're here for the long run, and that initially you might not see an income, but if I do believe wholeheartedly that if you've got an artist which has got the drive, they're putting out good quality music, and you've got the right manager, that all that hard work will pay off. So I think as long as you know from the outset that, you know what, regardless of what I do now, let me just be ready to put that graft in, make sure that I know that I've got to put that money in. I may not see it a return for a little bit, but if I carry on at it, then it'll come back to me.
That's really great. That's a really good answer. Talking about number of years, we've got a number of questions on the chat, and this question from Matt Kane: when should an artist expect to make some money back, and in how many years? Obviously, I'm sure it's like how long is a piece of string, but given the different artists that you've worked with, there might be an indication of some kind of range. And to be fair, these are questions that are not on most artists' lips anyway, so it'd be interesting to see what your thoughts are on that. Let me just put the question back up again.
Can I just quickly jump in on that one? I'm only going to say something very light. One of the things that I've had the privilege of doing over the years is being able to sit under other managers before me and people that have gone on to work with all the big companies, your Sonys and all that kind of stuff. And one thing that I've heard majority of them say is the same thing, that when you're signing the artist, ideally you're looking at a 5-year project. Right. That's what they've said. And that's in terms of developing the artist, getting them to where they need to be, releases, all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying that you're going to have to wait 5 years to see any money. That's not what I'm saying. But I think that gives you kind of a good glimpse in terms of how you need to be thinking when you're thinking about seeing that return and seeing things go the way that you want to, in terms of thinking a long plan. I know Loretta said earlier about having that year plan. That's what I do with my artists. But even when I'm putting that year plan, I'm still thinking 2 years, 3 years, 4 years beyond that. So I think yeah, there's no direct answer in terms of how long to
Of course.
wait for the money and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. It really depends on you as an artist, your material, you know, your team, all that kind of thing. But literally, just like I said again, go with the right mindset that it could work overnight, but at the same time, be willing to put that graft in. There's no set time.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to explain as well for anyone who might not understand in terms of when should an artist expect to be making money back. You have to understand first where artists make money from. So you can make money from live, well, at least pre-pandemic times you could. Usually you can make money from live, money from streams, money from your royalties, and money from your sales, and perhaps from merchandise as well. Now, if you think for all of those elements, if you think of them all separately, what it needs in order for that to be making money, first you've got to invest some money to make the music. You've got to think about, has that person, if they're signed to a label, even if it's a small independent label, has an advance been given? You're not going to earn any money until that advance has been recouped. So there's so many different things. It's not a case of, I've got my CD, I'm going to sell low. Unless you did everything yourself, there's other people that need to be paid and things that need to be invested. So it's not as simple. It's very difficult to say when you will earn money back, but it's just, I do meet a lot of artists who forget that things need to be paid back before you're going to be earning money. And sometimes that's a delay. I've seen people who see artists who are doing really well and saying, oh, you know, you must be rich now. Have you bought your car? It's just, they haven't been paid yet because perhaps they had a really massive advance. So it looks very successful on the outside, but it's not always how it looks. It's not always the reality. So it can take a very long time for an artist to be earning a living that the amount of money that they can actually live off, which is why so many independent artists have side hustles. Absolutely. And I don't think there's any shame in that. I think the aim is to get a sustainable career. And to do that, you need to be business minded. It's not about just chasing a hit, because that route is the minority of people who are overnight successes.
Absolutely. Sustainability.
So can I quickly say something on top of what she said?
Sure.
One thing I try to tell artists as well is, don't look towards the music as the main money maker, especially when you're starting, because there's so many other ways to make music. I know Matt Kane is the one that asked the question, so I'm going to address him directly just as an example. So Matt's got a song called One Name. I've heard it, I like it, and I know in that video itself, the music video, he's got a lot of like musicians, guitarists, keyboardists, all that kind of stuff. There's companies that will literally say, you know what, I'm going to pay you, Matt, £500. And all I want you to do is use our company's guitar every time you make a music video. So literally you can look at so you can literally go and get these partnerships, get these sponsorships with companies that will say, you know what, I'll use your products in my videos, or I'll talk about your products, wherever it might be, and they'll pay you a certain money to do that, as long as you're constantly doing what you say you're going to do. And that's another way that you can be making money, rather than saying, you know what, I've got to wait for 2 million streams before I can speak. Because in the meantime, while you're waiting for that 2 million streams,
because
you're still making music, you're still making videos. So look at other avenues of making money outside of that as well. What companies can you engage and all that kind of stuff in order to get a comeback on the money that you're putting in?
Absolutely. Chibuzor, I want to add to
that. I think Loretta and Marcus have covered it mostly, but what I would say is keeping an eye on the Benjamins, keeping an eye on the money, because it's, in this day of social media, it's very easy to wake up one morning and think, oh, I've got this brilliant idea. I'm going to shoot a video and I'm going to have this, I'm going to have that. And then by the time you finish, you've spent £5,000.
Absolutely.
And I mean, when you think about it, you look at how much you're making from your streaming, you look at how much you're making from any bookings that you're getting. If the quick maths doesn't give you a profit at the end of the day, it's going to be a loss. So I think this is where it's important to have a manager who can help you out with that, but also it's important to really think about that seriously, because I noticed with a lot of artists that it takes some time for them to get their heads in that space where they're thinking twice about just going off and doing XYZ, without actually considering, what is the impact on my bottom line? How is this going to affect what I'm
Yeah,
going
which
to
is
make at the end of the month.
yeah, which is why when you obviously, because I don't have a manager, so I kind of think in a different way. My brain is wired differently. But when you were talking about investing in your artist financially, I was thinking, wow, what in literally in my head, and that's to your point, CHIBUZOR, is I was going, wow, they're not going to feel that responsibility for the finances if you know you're doing a free photo shoot here, producing a song at the expense of the manager. So isn't doing that in itself not necessarily enabling the artist to be business minded? Shouldn't there be some commitment from the artist to say, you bring X amount and I bring X, either in actual or in actual cash or in intangible contributions, like, you know, free photo shoots and whatever. And then you have your plan. And this is a question that's just popping out of my head. And you have your plan, you have manager's contribution, artist contribution, and obviously you have your total expenses, and you know exactly what you need to get back in revenues to break even, and then start looking at profits, as opposed to as a manager. Yes, it's great to invest in artists, you know, in any ways, whether they're, you know, cash or kind, if you like, but wouldn't doing that to a certain degree mean that the artist is not thinking business? Because you're saying, well, some artists don't really think business. They're probably not doing that because they haven't put 10,000 parts into a project. I'm just saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a very, very valid question, you know, and it's the question that labels ask themselves all the time, is how much should I invest in this artist, or how much advance should I give to this artist, and am I going to get that money back? And that's why Marcus was saying you would have maybe a 5-year plan, a 3-year plan, a 1-year plan. It's the thing that limits how much you invest in an artist. And in investment in general, you know, there's always the view that 10% of what you invest in will probably do well. You know, it's the return on investment is usually on 10% of that investment that you've made. So it could be that you have 10 artists, one of them is going to probably do extremely well and cover for all the losses that you make with the other artists. So, I mean, going back to your question, yes, you're right. I mean, the artist may end up in a situation where they have no feel for how much is being invested in them. You know, they have no sense of, you know, how much it's costing. But that's not how I work. You know, I always make sure they're aware that, you know, this is how much we're investing. This is how much this video has cost. This is how much this photo shoot has cost, you know, and then, you know, this is what I expect from you, or expect us to try and achieve in the next 2 years or so.
Absolutely.
You know? So it's a long-term plan. It's not a 6-month thing. You know, it's not a sprint. It's a marathon. You know, and we have a plan over the period, and after that time, we start to say, okay, we've tried this. It's not worked. You know, I'm going to have to reduce the investment here, or we're going to have to try something else, you know. So there is always that, you know, that reality check to say, look, this is how much we're spending, and this is what we need to change to try and improve the return on investment. Yeah, it's quite important.
I think one thing I'd just like to add, though, in artists' defense, like, and I know it's different depending on where you are, where you're starting out, and if you're completely independent or where you are. But one of the reasons I started in management is because I think that independent artists are some of the hardest working people out there, and they didn't become a singer to be doing admin and to be doing the things that they have to do, you know, all of these things. Yeah, and I feel sorry for them that they have to do that. They're in a position because creative-minded people often don't have those skills, the organizational and all of that. And that is a very good reason to have a team and to have a manager around you. So when you do have a manager, there is a certain extent that, yes, the artists, you want them to still be pulling their weight, but their weight is bringing their talent to the table. At the end of the day, I don't have a job to do without a talented artist. And I think sometimes when I've engaged with labels, I find it difficult working with labels, and their expectation of the artist. Sometimes I think they forget they've signed this artist because of their talent. That's what they bring. They're bringing. You wouldn't have a job without them.
Absolutely.
So I think it's about being realistic about what you can do. If you've got something that you really can't do, that is why you've got a manager. So you can expect your manager to do that for you. But the analogy I like to use is, you know, it's like you're in this rowboat on your own, and when you get a manager and the manager hops in the boat, you can either go right and go like that, and then the manager's struggling, or you can go right, there's two of us now and you're both rowing, and then that's a bit stronger. So it's still doing your part. But I think you'll get more out of it if you do bring your best in every way that you can. But I do get it when artists are like, I just want to play my guitar, I just want to sing my songs. You know, I get it.
Yeah. I'd love to just do music and not have to worry about anything whatsoever, to be fair. But no, I don't even think I think I tend to struggle if I probably do some confession time. I tend to struggle sometimes with when I know certain things need to be done, I just get up and do them. So for me, it will be a struggle to just be like, okay, let me just sing. But then hold on, I need to, you know, do my admin. I need to do this, that, and the other. I'll just get it done. It's like, just do it.
And you're very good at it, Sarah. I know from when I first met you, you had your plan, you had and your mind works that way because of your job. So, you know, and you find it hard sometimes, but some people, their brain, it's not their skills, it's not their talents.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to say, Sarah, you're probably an example of an artist who doesn't need a manager, you know.
Oh, no!
I may be wrong, but I've met you a few times, and I think, you know, you've probably got it on the lock and key. Maybe, of course, you could do with some help, but I think you probably do a good job by yourself.
Loretta said it at the start. She said, because I asked, when do you need a manager? She said, carry on with your career until you get to a point where you can go no further on your own. I'm definitely going to get to that point when I can go no further on my own. I know it's coming, but I think probably on that theme, actually, and I was going to talk about a couple of things. I was going to talk about admin and conflict management. But before we go there, talking about, you know, self-management, if an artist, you know, was like, okay, either I don't have a manager because I've applied and I've been, you know, denied or whatever, or I just have to get it done, I don't want to wait any longer. Who do you think, or who would you suggest an artist should have in their team to support them? Because there are just so many moving parts and so many things, from the booking to the branding to the marketing to promotion and all of that. Who would you suggest are the core people an artist should have in their team, even if it's just on a freelancer kind of capacity or whatever, as a self-managed artist now?
I guess it depends on what they need. Again, you know, it really depends on what they need. You know, are they struggling with, you know, bookings, for example? You know, maybe just handling emails and stuff. You know, some people just really get overwhelmed with that kind of stuff. You know, so they need somebody to help with that. Are they struggling with their finances and just keeping on top of that? You know, then maybe you need a manager who can do that kind of stuff. Are they struggling with their branding, you know, and designs? Maybe they need to improve that side of things. Then maybe they don't need a manager. Maybe they need a very good designer. It really depends, you know, and like Marcus said earlier as well, you know, some managers, when I started, I could, I mean, I have skills in, I can use Photoshop quite well, if I say so myself.
Oh, that's good. I'll be coming to you.
No, don't. I mean, I used to, I think the first single we released, I designed the cover art. So you can go and search for it. I'm not going to tell you which one, but
is it called out? Because I have they're all there. I just got the oldest one.
No, it wasn't called out. So yeah, so you know, and just to quickly mention, and I know this is not the question you asked, but I think I always think of management or looking after an artist like the role of a product manager, because essentially what you're trying to do is create a product, package it, and then market it to people, you know, so that they buy it. You know, I mean, we know we're not really selling music per se now, but they're listening to your music. You're trying to build a product, right? So, and it goes all the way from the beginning of actually making sure that the product is of a good quality. You know, the music is great. People love it. They latch onto it. And once you have that product, the next thing is, how do I get people to hear it? You know, how do I get people to buy into it? And how do I get people to buy into the spirit and the ethos of the product? Because you can have an amazing product, but people think it was built or designed using poor and hungry kids in some countries, so they don't buy it. It's so there's so many things around building a product and trying to sell it and get it out. So if you're an artist who is trying to build that product and you see that you're lacking in certain areas, then you just need to go and try and find that help. And you may be lucky to find a manager that can do almost everything, in which case it's a win-win.
Win-win. Good stuff. Whilst we're talking about the finances and the multiple streams of income, there was a question I was actually going to ask around admin. So, and metadata. So I think a couple of weeks ago we had Les and Keith talk about publishing and metadata and the importance of and the criticality that they play when it comes to artist success, particularly around metadata and admin. So given that you've worked with different artists in different capacities, what would you say your role is in admin, particularly when it comes to music admin, managing the metadata, ensuring that the registrations are everywhere? Because as you mentioned earlier, that is everyone's nightmare, every artist's nightmare. Is that something that you take off of them, or is that something you leave them to, or do you do it hand in hand, as Loretta talked about, jointly rowing the boat? How that is a bit of a nightmare for most artists. So if an artist came to a manager, would they definitely be like, yeah, here, take the burden? Or how has that dynamic worked within your different networks?
For me, it's different with all of my artists. So I mean, I say that, I was just about to say I don't think anyone likes admin, but there are strange people out there who enjoy admin. I'm not one of them. I think because I was a creative myself, it took me a long time to even see myself as a manager, I think. So we all don't like the admin side of it, but it needs to be done. But there's two of my artists. They're not quite the official weirdos who enjoy admin, but they don't mind it. So they quite like to do their own. And then I've got a couple who absolutely not only hate it, but can't do it. It's going to go wrong if they do it.
Fair enough.
So then I do it. So it's again, I think I would see that as the job as the manager to get it done. Like ideally, I would eventually want to take on an assistant, and that's the sort of job that I would get them to do, to make sure that it's registered, because it's such an important part, but it is a laborious part. And if we start even talking about PPL, it's also a headache to do it as well. But it has to be done. I think, most artists who were independent for a while are used to having done that for a long time, that it just comes second nature to them when they do it. But if artists perhaps who have been signed fairly early on in their career may never have had to do it themselves, so they don't know. So it's for me, it's a mixture, but it's a job that cannot go undone.
Absolutely, totally agree. I couldn't agree more. Marcus and CHIBUZOR on the admin metadata topic.
I definitely agree with Loretta. I think it's kind of a mixed one. I try to do as much of it as I can personally myself. I do like to take the burden off artists for that. I have worked with artists that actually love doing it, so they're proper on it. And I ain't got nothing no problem, as long as I know that you're doing it and it's been done in the right way. By all means, I'll just look over them and make sure that they're doing what they need to do. But at the same time, on the flip side, I think it's important for artists to know how to do it, even if they don't manage it completely themselves. I think it's important that artists know how to do it. So I do encourage them to say, have you checked this out? Have you looked at this? Do you understand this? One of the things I tell a lot of artists, especially if I've signed someone which I know is starting from the ground roots up, I'll send them to certain websites and say, look, read and just research and understand. And if you've got any questions, you come back, we sit down, we'll chat, and I can help you through it. But in general, I try to do it myself and let them just focus on everything else. But as long as I know that they have, even if it's just a minimal understanding, so that they're not just completely oblivious about it.
I'd say before CHIBUZOR comes in and gives his answer, I'd say in the course of doing, and again, I know when I give these responses, it sounds like I'm an annoying aunt, but when you do it for them, do you actually get them to keep a log of their performances as well? Because when it comes to PRS, artists need to register their performances. And if you're doing it on their behalf and they're not reporting their performances to you or even keeping a log and reporting them to you, that's money lost. So do you also kind of oversee those kind of aspects, or how does it work with you?
You know, I will say this, that the last 3 artists that I signed to Uprise Music, obviously it was within the whole COVID thing, so I've not had to worry about events and all that kind of
Oh
stuff.
yeah, there you go.
During
Fair
that
enough.
period.
You know, you can
But,
actually,
for example,
you know that, so, just a quick one for those listening, right? The PRS have actually instituted online, what's it called now, venues where if you perform on Facebook, you can make money. So that's a segue, but that's another way to make money for those who may be interested. But carry on.
Yeah, so, but I'll just use Chris as an example because I've had him a lot longer in the thing. So I know there's a lot of stuff he wasn't doing prior to being with me, and I had to really get on his case. And even up to well, prior to COVID, when we was doing a lot of events, I would say to him, even if I know I was going to do it myself, I would say to him, have you looked into PRS? Have you seen, you know, checked what you've got registered in there and stuff like that? Because I think it's important for him to realize that you can't, and I said this in another meeting yesterday, I think it was, that literally you can't just register with PRS, PPO and just leave it there, that I've registered and I'm good. You have to be on it hard, like literally every little thing. If you know your music's been played somewhere that and it's not been thing, let them know.
Put it in there,
performing, whatever, everything needs to go in there. So I would just second what you said, Sarah, that literally make sure that you're actually using PRS, PPO. Don't just pay £100 to PRS and then you're not actually giving them the data that they need.
There.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
CHIBUZOR?
I don't know if you noticed how my head sank when you said metadata.
Oh, I didn't notice.
Yeah, honestly, it's the bane of my life. But it's got to be done, and I think, I mean, in answer to your question, you know, should artists be doing that kind of stuff? You know, should they know about it? I think they should. I don't know how much my artists know about it, to be honest, because I do it all the time for them. They know about ISRCs and UPCs and that's about it, you know. But the rest is done for them, you know. CHIBUZOR takes care of it all. But that's worked for us, you know. It's the way I keep on top of things and make sure that everything is in order. I mean, I realized,
I feel like you should still, and I know again I might sound like an annoying aunt, but I feel like they should still know how these things are done.
Yeah, they
even though you're doing it for them, and obviously you're being paid for that. But
like I said to you, not every artist is like you, right? You can send them information, you can tell them everything you want to tell them. I even have long conversations trying to explain these things.
Fair enough.
They might be on the phone but not listening. You know, it's really boring stuff as well.
It is boring. It is boring.
You know, it's not exciting for an artist who wants to spend time creating music. You know, so this is where the manager comes in. I think it's a very, very important task. I will say something. I didn't realize how really important it was to have all your metadata really like in tip-top shape until we had to move from one distributor, move 120 songs from one distributor to another, you know. Absolutely. And then you suddenly realize that it's really important that your spreadsheet is in form, everything's up to date, and you have every single thing, because the metadata, your music is as good as its metadata, you know. If the metadata is all over the place, and even things like you upload a song or you release music and you haven't taken the time to store away your cover art properly, you know, because you may need the cover art someday. You think because you've uploaded it, you don't need to save the cover art somewhere. You might find that you need to have that cover art. You need the original master file to be able to even transfer to another distributor if you need to. So it's things like that. There's filing, you know, it's not just the metadata, it's filing of the necessary files as well. You know, and like you said, recording information about where you've performed. If you've heard your music being performed anywhere as well, there's that as well. You know, was it sung in a church? You know, for the CCLI side of things, you know, do you have all that information stored? You know, and do you have a very, very easy way to locate that information when you need it? You know, that's really important.
Absolutely. And obviously,
you know, can I jump in and say something? Something cheeky, just kind of backing up what CHIBUZOR was saying, because it has been the headache of my life trying to get covers from some artists when it comes to just storing those things, and then suddenly I'm getting sent like an old Facebook picture of a cover, and they expect me to crop it, or I don't know what. Seriously, guys, you need to make sure you have everything. I don't want to do an episode of Spin or Video on here.
Is that being sent to you as a radio, in your capacity as a radio presenter? You're getting that from people who submit their music?
Yeah, radio presenter, and over the years as a manager, when I'm trying, because when you say I take an artist on, I like to know what they've done so far.
Fair enough.
As well.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
And for example, I've worked with artists, and by the time I've signed them, I've found out that they've released all these songs and they put no ISRC codes on them. So I like to know exactly what's happened the whole journey, so I can kind of plan ahead. So those little things pop up during those periods, I'm like, yeah, you need to make sure you're keeping everything, every little piece of information, every cover, everything, because you never know, like people said, when you're going to need it. Never.
Yeah. And it's a brilliant source of income, if I do say so myself. So highly recommend. I had a question from Matt again, which very interesting one, actually. Another question: when it comes to artists, in your experience, what has been the difference between, say, a Called Out Music, Governor B, Josh Luke Smith, etc., and other not so successful Christian artists? And this is from Matt Kane.
Very
loaded question.
Oh my days, it's a very good question. And I think if I knew the answer, like the real, answer, I would probably be a very rich man. I would make every single one of my artists, super successful. I think some artists have something, that really draws people to them, and it's that likability factor. I think that plays a huge role. I really think that does. I think on top of the music being great, on top of the music being amazing, I think there's something, that people get drawn to. I also think that there's a huge part of hard work, that, goes into the lives of these people. I mean, the two people you mentioned, Called Out Music and Governor B, I've worked with them before, and these guys are bang, 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 hardworking people. They are very clear about what they want to achieve. They are very focused on the target, on the goal. They know what works, what doesn't work. They understand their genre, the type of music they're trying to put out. Governor B has no doubt about, his sound. He's very clear about that. You can hear it from his music. Called Out as well. These guys are actually very, very focused artists. And every year in, year out, they're releasing projects. They're releasing lots and lots of music. So if you imagine the work rate that goes into releasing the number of songs that these guys release each year, that they're really hardworking. So, I mean, from my experience, obviously, I've managed several artists. I can see certain differences between some of my artists. And you can tell that there's certain traits they have, and I think I would just, for now, I'll just put it down to the work rate, and that spark, that these guys have.
I think the only thing I would add, obviously, two of those artists are artists that I manage on there. And I think, and I say this on every panel that I'm on every boot camp that I do with I Am Independent, is I honestly believe if you are three things, which is excellent, first and foremost, consistent and persistent, it will pay off. And it needs, you can't just have one of those or two of those. You have, your music has to be excellent, but you do also have to be along with that consistent and persistent. And I think that does pay off. But I also think in terms of the question, it's interesting because of a successful artist, I'm obsessed with this whole thing of successful, because I think you have to define what success means for you. And it may really be very different. Success doesn't have to mean a #1 single. It could be, I want to be able to pay my bills from my music, or I've got an album in me that I just want to release, and that's success. So I think in terms of, I assume the thinking behind that question is, how do I become successful like them? Well, I think the advice I would give to an artist is to, first and foremost, put time into knowing who you are. All of those artists you mentioned, and just like CHIBUZOR said, basically, they know they've got a distinctive sound. They know who they are. They've done the work to know who they are. They're also very strategic in how they go about things. So you can, that's something that you can learn, to be strategic and to have a plan as well, and then to work really hard, like we've all said, but making sure that your music, you know who you are as an artist, and your music is the very best it can be. And then you've just got to keep at it. You've got to not give up. You've got to be consistent and persistent. And I do believe that it will pay off, and that success might look different, but I do believe that a form of success will come with those three things.
Definitely. I can totally echo that. Marcus, I don't know if you want to weigh in on
the key word that Loretta used, which I was going to use as well, was literally the consistency part. I can't stress that out enough. And again, consistency, a lot of artists say, well, you know, what is consistency? I know artists, for example, they release great songs, everybody loves it, raves about it for months, and then I don't hear from them for another 6, 7, 8, 9 months. And for me, that's not a sign of consistency, because it's a cliche saying that we live in a microwave world. You know what I'm saying? Things happen so fast, and especially as an artist, you can't afford. And I'm not saying you have to be releasing tracks like every week, every month, whatever year, right? But even if you release something, there's that constant follow-up of it, and working behind it, all that kind of stuff. So you're constantly in front of people. So you're really being very consistent in terms of what you're doing. All the time, whether it's going to be releasing, your engagement, whatever it is, you're very consistent. The other thing as well that I wanted to say is there's a certain drive and a certain way of thinking that you need to have as well. So I'll use Governor B, for example. I know that Governor B wasn't just Governor B overnight. And I'm not talking about in terms of name. I'm talking about in terms of the popularity that we know of Governor B. He'll be the first to tell you that he released music and he was trying this, that, and the other before he had that one hit single, which blew him up. Do you know what I'm saying? And then from that, he learned a lot of lessons, and he's now doing all the great stuff that he's doing now. But it wasn't an overnight thing. He had to work at it hard. Like I said, find out who he was, put that effort into it. So, you know, some people you'll release your music and you think yourself, no one's playing it, you get discouraged, and then you're not on it as hard as you was before. You know what I'm saying? Someone tells you 2 bad lines about they don't like your music or whatever, and then suddenly, you know, you're not on it as you were before. You need to be constantly honest. That even when you get your setbacks, you've been rejected, you're still pushing, you're still driving, you're still saying, you know what, I want to make sure that I'm doing this because this is my passion and I want to achieve it. So, you know, being very much like that. And the last thing I'll say is like I said, the mind frame as well, is I speak to a lot of artists, and the things that I tell them I think you could be doing, they don't believe in themselves. They really don't believe in themselves. And I'll use something very basic in terms of stuff that artists talk about. So everybody raves about getting on BBC One Extra, but no one wants to submit their stuff to BBC One Extra because they don't think it's going to get played. They don't think this. I'm thinking, well, if you're thinking like that already, you're already defeating yourself. I've always had a mentality, whether I'm dealing with artists or my own stuff, that, you know what, I'm going to aim for the big places instantly. They tell me no, they want to know why you're telling me no, because then I can go back and work on that. And then when I come back again, I've done what you told me to do. But I never allow myself to think small. Do you know what I'm saying? Anything that my artists tell me they want to achieve, I say, yeah, we can do that. Regardless of how long I think it will take, I say, yeah, we can do that, because I honestly believe with the hard work, reaching the right people and having that consistency, that you can achieve what you want to achieve. So again, like I said, the mind frame is that if you say to yourself, you know, this is where I want to get to, you plan properly, you set the right things in place, then you'll get there. Just don't allow yourself to think small, because you think, you know what, I'm not sure they're going to like it, and I'm not sure if they're going to play. I'm not sure if I should market it like this. No, go at it 100%. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But even when it doesn't work, you're going to learn something.
Yeah, definitely. That literally sums it up really nicely, and the comments are literally exploding as well. But no, that was a really good question. One question I was going to ask, because there's one other question in the comment section which I want to take, but I'm saving that for last because I think it would be a nice way to wrap everything up. I was going to ask about conflict management, because we talked about earlier on we talked about the dynamic being more of a family dynamic, and obviously sometimes you agree to disagree, sometimes you disagree to disagree. How have you found that dynamic within your individual spaces? Because I think something that artists need to prepare themselves for. I mean, this is a video that's going to be watched back by people who may even be in the process of signing a new manager or having a relationship with a manager or moving from one manager to the next. And I think conflict management is something that people need to be aware of, because no matter how we think about it, there would always be conflict about one thing or another. And I think just getting your views on how you go about conflict management could be helpful for somebody who may be considering having an artist management relationship. So I don't know who wants to go first.
I can. I think because ultimately it's a relationship, and it is a business relationship, but just like we've all said, it's different to that. It's a personal relationship as well as a business one, so it's very unique. But if you think about how you would approach any relationship that's important to you, where there's conflict, to me, those are the principles that I apply. So, you know, if you perhaps have conflict in your place of work with someone you don't have a personal investment in, it's easy to just brush off or go, oh, well, that's what they, you know, or just not think very well of them, or even not bother to resolve it. But one thing you can't afford to do with a family member, and the same with an artist manager relationship, is to leave things unresolved and unsaid, because they will turn into resentments and they will fester. So again, that's why I said at the beginning that to me one of the most important things is to have honesty. And that means in the very nature of any relationship that's important, conflict will definitely come. It absolutely will. And I think that if you've nurtured a relationship that's built on trust and family, then hopefully you can provide an environment where conflict, when each person can be heard. And I think just being honest. So I've definitely had my artists say to me sometimes when perhaps I've not met an expectation, and my challenge is to hear that, and if they've got a point, to apologize and to address that. And absolutely, there's been situations when I've seen something differently than my artists have. And even when we faced a decision when I absolutely think, I don't think this is the right thing. But having said that about the relationship, you have to remember the manager works for the artist. So if there was a situation that came up and the artist wanted to do something, and I said, I don't think this is right, and we would have a conversation about it. And I hope that there would be a relationship there, that my opinion would be a valuable one and would be listened to, we would come to. But ultimately, if they wanted to do something that I didn't think was right, they can do that. I work for them. You know, for example, if it was, I don't know, a label situation or something, then and again, I would then still have to be on. I'd want to go on the record that I've said, okay, I think this is the wrong thing, but I would support them because that's what I am there to do. But I think the conflicts that we've had, again, the same as in relationships in life, they definitely make the relationship stronger. The first one is the make or break.
Yes,
like it is
right.
with any important relationships, and you'll either go your separate ways, but if you can get through that, usually it strengthens the relationship. So honesty is just number one. Being able to never been in a situation where you feel that you can't say if something's bothered you, and I encourage my artists, is there any, you know, if I sense something, giving them the freedom and the space to say if there is, and then just talking about it really honestly.
That's really good, really insightful. Marcus, CHIBUZOR?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. Definitely one of those. It's a difficult topic.
Inevitable, nonetheless.
Yeah,
you can't avoid it.
I mean, if we're talking the relationship into the conflict between the artists themselves, I have in the earlier days been in situations where, for example, I've had artists have issue with the fact that they felt that I was doing something for one artist I wasn't doing for them.
Exactly.
And it does cause a bit of friction and stuff like that. And it was really trying to kind of explain to Ashley, it's not a case of I've got to do this for them and do it for you. You got to understand that both you're on your own separate journeys. So, like, what I might be doing for them is different because that's where they're at in their journey right now. And I haven't done it for you because maybe you're going down a completely different path. So it's finding a way to kind of put that in. But you know, like those kind of conflicts are very much happened at the beginning, and I kind of found that I learned a lot of lessons leading up to the point where I am now. So there's certain conversations I will have with artists even before I take them on, in regards to how I deal with other artists within Uprise and how they would feel regarding certain situations. And I do try to make it very clear to them that there will be occasions where you might look and see somebody seems to be doing something or getting a certain limelight, but that's because that's where they're at there. It doesn't mean that you're never going to get there, but I'm not going to be one of those people, for example, if I feel you're not ready for something, say I'm going to chase on that, unless you really say to me, you know what, I need this. Like Loretta said, you work for them, so like you kind of need to do things on their journey. So I think for me, like 98% of myself, I do it their way, but there is that 2% where I'm just like, no, you're not. Regardless, I can't. And I had that realness with them because I feel like I need to, because I think they need to understand where I'm at with it, because they know that I'm behind them 100% in general. But I think there's times where I think artists and managers can see certain things which will be to the detriment of the artist.
Differently,
yeah. And I think I don't want to allow myself to support something which I know is going to harm them. And then they'll come back to me and say, well, you allow me to do this. Well, so I will literally give them all the advice and opinions and say, listen, I can see what's going to happen here. And if you do this thing, this is the outcome. And like I said, I'll support as much as I can, but there have been the odd occasions where I've just said, look, if you want to go ahead and do it, I can't stop you because this is your journey. But I'm going to have to pull away from it. And it can't be something directly associated to whatever label it is. And I'm very clear with that. And like I said, because I've got that kind of relationship with the artist, I think I've been fortunate up to today where there's been an understanding where they say, okay, cool, I know, I totally get that. But yeah, it's different for each one. I kind of just got to navigate each artist very differently. And I think they all understand I'm in it for them all equally anyway.
So interest, cool.
Yeah. And this is a very interesting question because, you know, as in, I think we're dealing with artists specifically, you know, they're very creative beings, you know, they're creating music all the time. They're trying to put out, you know, a piece of them, you know, and a lot of the time, if you say anything about what they're trying to do, it could feel very personal, you know. They're creating something. I think I got to understand this when. Oh, sorry, 1 second. I need to sort out my camera. Give me 1 second.
No worries. I can totally relate to what he's saying though, because when I started out, my producer told me the song I wanted to release as my debut single may not necessarily be the best choice. And even though he was just my producer, he did quite a fair bit of pseudo management, for which I'm eternally grateful, because on his advice, I did not release that song as my first single, and I released Still My Joy instead, which got me noticed, if you like. But as he's saying, New Day was my second single. It was so close to my heart. It was like my baby. And if it was left to me, that would be the first song I put out. So just to kind of echo what he was just saying there, I can picture myself in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I the first time I really experienced this was when in the early days when I used to do graphic design. I used to do cover arts for my artists. And I remember spending hours on this cover art, you know, did my best, you know. Marcus, you probably relate with this, you know, what happened. Honestly, I put my best work in and sent it to the artist, and he was like, don't like it.
Oh,
you know? Yeah. Why is the font like this? I don't like this font, you know. And it was like a very direct, I don't like it, you know. And I felt so hurt by it, so offended that, you know, can you not see the beauty I've created, you know, here? Can you not see this masterpiece? Exactly. But I think it really gave me a lot of insight into what it's like for an artist to spend hours and hours creating music, and then, you know, they bring it out, and then you say, yeah, you can say things like, I'm not feeling it, you know, it's not right, you know, whatever. And then I started to learn very quickly that there are better ways, you know, to communicate how you feel about, you know, what they've done. there are better ways to try and manage situations like that, so that you avoid conflict. There's situations I experience and I can see this could easily go downhill very quickly.
Yeah.
But it's just the way you manage it, and this is what makes a very good manager, is that they can see conflict coming a mile off, and they can try and manage it straight away before it even happens. But to your question, when conflict does happen, it's very important that artists and manager are able to talk about it. Communication is key, and trust is absolutely important. And I think every single one of my artists, there's always a period, around just towards the end of the honeymoon period, where you have to have that conversation. How is it going? Do you trust? Are you happy with this? This partnership that we're in?
Yeah.
Is it working for you? And actually give them space to be able to just tell you if they feel they're happy about it, and make them feel that, look, if they're not happy, you're more than happy for them to leave. I really think that conversation has to be had, so that you can break the ground properly, and actually, usually after that happens, it's usually smooth sailing afterwards, at least in my experience.
Yeah, definitely. Like with every relationship, I guess conflict is inevitable, and it tends to lead to growth. Lots of comments here and questions, but I'm going to take the very last question. I've actually been saving this for last, and it's from David Williams, and he says many artists still manage themselves. So what would you say is the biggest advantage of having a manager? And I think that's a good way to wrap up the night. What is the biggest advantage of having a manager, particularly given a lot of artists now self-manage?
I think it's basically not having to do everything by yourself. If you don't have a manager, then you probably are doing most of the things that need to be done to be an artist, that are probably getting in the way of you being an artist. So I think that the biggest advantage is being able to get on with just doing the bits of which are probably, when you dreamt about being an artist, what you thought it would look like. You get those memes of, what people think it is, what it really is. And I literally think that the biggest advantage of having a manager is you can get on with being a creative and making great music, and having somebody to hold that with you, but also somebody to be a sounding board, somebody to bring ideas that you may not have, to think outside of the box, somebody to create opportunities for you beyond the network that you have. There, I would say, are the main advantages, but the number one, to not be doing things alone.
Totally agree.
Yeah, I'll say a manager is there to support you. There's a lot of people who realize the value in having a team, and sometimes having that manager is the team you need at that point in time. Just a sounding board, somebody to talk to about some of the decisions you're making, and also helping you with all the difficult admin work, that then frees you up to do the real stuff, which is creating great music. I think that if you have the right manager will be able to see opportunities that you're missing or you're not taking advantage of. A good manager will speak for you, help you handle those situations that you would rather not handle yourself.
Yeah, you're right.
There's so many things that artists are having to deal with directly, and I think they don't really need to be facing or dealing with those kind of conversations. A manager should be having those conversations for you. I think it really also just adds a bit of professionalism. I can't say the word to what you do when you have a manager. If you can afford one, you can. If you think that you need some help, then it's definitely a good time to look into getting a manager.
Definitely.
I would just echo what these guys have said, predominantly, to tell the truth. That professionalism for me is a big thing. I've heard lots of reports from people that have booked my artists and done various things about the professionalism in the whole process. So I think that's a major thing there as well. And not just in terms of that the managing of the artist is thing, but also sometimes depending on who you are, because some managers will have experience of years of doing it and they'll gain knowledge and stuff like that, which they can pour into you. Other managers have gone and studied various things, whether it be business law, whatever it might be. So there's all different things that can help. And also that protection in front of you, because I know with my artists, for example, if they have any issues, once that issue comes between them and the venue or them and another client, I automatically become the wall between the artist and the client. So basically everything hits me rather than the artist. So so I think that it does add that as well.
And I think, I mean, you guys have given some really packed responses, which are all pretty much accurate and spot on. But I think one thing that Loretta said at the start, which is literally glued in my memory now, is as an independent artist, you can only go so far. So you carry on paddling with your, with your career, with your boat, if you like, on your own until you get to a point where you can go no further. And I think that is the underpinning factor, whether it's to do with professionalism, marketing, admin, whatever it is. When you get to the point where you feel like I need help, then get a manager. Which begs the question, what happens when you don't get a manager? Because the truth is, as you all have said, you get emails every day from people wanting to be managed. But unfortunately, one, there's a scarcity of managers as far as I can tell. Maybe it's just me. I don't know many great managers. I'm sorry, but that's just the truth. Personal observation. And two, they're all taken. So, so for the artist who has paddled their boat solo and gotten to the point where they feel, okay, I need somebody else in my boat, what can they do? I have a few ideas in my head, but I want to get your view on this. What can they do? And I think we'll just wrap it up here, sum it up nicely. So I can't have a manager because they're all taken. What can I do because I need help?
Well, one of the things that we didn't cover was how we all got into management. And it would be interesting to hear that, because I certainly didn't just decide to be a manager, and most people haven't, a bit more these days, but it's not necessarily a career that somebody decided to do. Usually they were doing something else before, like Marcus said, he was doing promotions and that kind of thing. And the reason I bring that up is because there could be somebody in your life who could actually end up being a manager, who has those skills, but they're not a manager yet. Maybe you've got a friend at church or at uni or something who's like, oh, they're really... I literally was interviewing artists and they kept saying to me, you should be a manager. And I was like, no, I'm not a manager, but you should speak to that person. And have you thought about doing this with your plan? And I kept doing this good advice, and people kept saying, oh, you'd be a really good manager. Like, no, I'm a creative. I like mentoring. And then it was only when Gov said to me, well, isn't that what a good manager is meant to be? And I was like, oh yeah, I suppose so. And for a while I didn't want to call it a manager, but the skills that a manager has, there could be somebody in your life that who you could even ask to maybe do some of those things for you. And perhaps they would fall into it. I kind of got sucked into it. And many managers, I know nobody's had a straightforward route into management. Right. So that's one thing I would say. Obviously, do what you can yourself, like I said at the beginning. But is there somebody else in your life? They may not be a manager, but they may have the skills that could help you in the areas that you don't.
That's a really good answer.
Absolutely. If I can jump in, Marcus. I think what Loretta said is correct. I mean, I kind of happened upon, being a manager, in the sense that, I had artists around me who wanted to release music, and they just needed somebody, and I was literally a friend, around at that time, and I said, look, I love what you do, believe in what you do, let's work it out, let's figure it out. And I went ahead and figured it out. And here I am.
That's brilliant.
I know artists who, have, their moms are their managers, they have, or maybe the mom would not call themselves a manager, but at least they're helping with stuff, they're helping.
Burna Boy's mom is his manager.
Yes, Burna Boy's mom. I know, I think Shireen's mom also helps her with a lot of stuff that she does as well. you know, so that the artists who have family members who are helping out with stuff, you know, and it doesn't have to be a formal thing. It really just needs to be somebody who completely believes in what you do, and you trust them as well, because it's important to trust whoever it is that is helping you to manage your affairs.
I agree, totally. Brilliant.
Yeah, I would just go with what these guys said. If you can't actually get a manager, sometimes literally just bring on other people that you trust to kind of really support you, and the work that you're doing. I think, you know, looking at myself and what I'm doing in terms of Uprise, you know, I've brought on other people into it solely because I didn't want to manage every aspect of it. And there's people that I'm training up now just to do certain jobs within Uprise. And I think the same thing for an artist. If you can't get a manager, especially if you're saying that the artists are managing themselves for a long time, sometimes they develop the skills themselves to be able to book really well and all that kind of stuff. Maybe bring somebody in and teach them what you've learned and say, look, can you just take this on?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a really good one. Yeah.
And really like do this for me. So it just frees your hands from having to do that thing. So yeah, just like look at people you trust and bring them on board.
Excellent. And I think that is a perfect way to wrap up this evening. This has been really, really informative. And if you've joined towards the end, you might want to catch it from the beginning, because there've been so many wonderful nuggets on, you know, the entire theme of artist management, relationships with a manager, and everything that you need to look for in that relationship. I'm hoping that if you've been watching on Facebook and YouTube, you've taken a few things away from this conversation. But thank you so much for hanging with us, for the comments, for the questions, for the banter. It's been really, really and there's still more comments coming through. Roger Moore's just joined on as well. It's been really, really worth well, I'm hoping it's been worth your hour and 45 minutes, but I've really had a great time, and it's been a really good time hanging with Loretta, Chibuzor, and Marcus. And I have to say thank you so much, Chibuzor. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Loretta, for your time, for sacrificing nearly 2 hours of your Thursday evening. But I genuinely feel that this is going to be beneficial to artists today and for people who may watch in the future as well. So thank you for everyone who's been hanging out with us this evening on Facebook and YouTube. And again, thank you to our guests for coming and pouring and investing in us, your time and your knowledge. Really appreciate it. Next week, we're going to be, again, having Equilibrium Live I keep saying 7 p.m. I actually did a post today that said 7 p.m. It must be a sign that I'm tired. At 9 p.m. next Thursday, we have another episode of Equilibrium Live, and we will be talking about blurring the line between Christian and mainstream music, because that's another topic that apparently gets talked about a fair bit and not very much explored. And I'm not going to tell you who the guests are. They're all confirmed, but they're going to be showing up here next Thursday. So do join us next Thursday for another episode 8. It's episode 8 of Equilibrium Live, 9 p.m. next Thursday. Subscribe if you haven't, and hit the notification bell. I think there's such a thing, so you don't miss it when we come live. Thanks, everyone, and have a great Thursday evening and a great weekend ahead. God bless.